Welcome everybody to this Pace's Revenue Management Interest Group session. It will be the first of an ongoing series, and I'm happy today to have three very qualified, very interesting people who will be helping lead the session. And our topic today is pricing for different customer demographics. And our speakers today are Organa from Leiden University, Kim from Nordics and Baltics at Clock PMS Plus, and Daniel from Burnside Capital and Parker Mechanical. So we are recording the session today. It will be available for playback if you missed part of it or want to listen to it again. We do want this to be interactive. So if you have any questions or comments or experiences you want to share or ask, feel free to unmute yourself and do so. Or if you prefer, you could answer them in the chat feature, and I'll try to keep an eye on that. So without further ado, take it away, panelists.
So perhaps I will begin. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. It's an honor, and it was a great pleasure to work with other speakers in preparing this friendly talk. We would like it, as Rafe mentioned, to be interactive and informal, right? So we don't give a lecture. We would like to talk on a topic. I'm calling from Berlin, Germany. It is now 4 p.m. So I'm an external PhD candidate at Leiden University. My topic is revenue management from the point of view of profit maximization in industries with constrained capacities. And so my business experience as a business owner is mainly B2B. I've been working in industrial equipment supply for, first of all, for industrial enterprises. And yeah, so my dissertation is in hotel and restaurant management. So I'll try to stay on profitability aspects today.
Great. Okay, I can continue. So my name is Kim Spolén. I'm situated in Sweden, just outside Stockholm in Sweden, so also in the Central European time zone, the same as Ghana. My background is mainly hotel and travel industry, and worked some 20 years plus in hotel itself, and now on the technical side since fairly many years back also. So my take on this is hotels and the travel industry have worked with this kind of rate management and revenue management for many years. It's from my side, it's the airline industry that basically started with. We'll come back to that. And yeah, so I'm more from the business to consumer area than B2B in my area. So we are covering slightly different. Daniel?
All right. I'm Daniel Burnside. I'm in the Mountain West time zone in rural Colorado. My background's in airlines and then consulting and finance. And currently I'm a business owner running a small business. So overseeing all the pricing there.
Right.
So would be right. So we defined the kind of key areas of types of different customer demographics. And the focus of today's conversation is how do I make sure that I stay profitable when I'm involved and dive into pricing to different types of customers, different times of the day, week, and months, or based on level of urgency. Can it wait, or is it urgent? Also, how do we price differently according to different business strategies and product configurations? And of course, how do we price differently to different generations? And as I already mentioned, so let's try to think what are the pitfalls of pricing, discounts, profit maximization, and how do we make sure that we stick to profit targets?
So I'll talk a little bit about pricing to different customers. So in my career, I've priced both in B2B and B2C. And it's very different how you end up doing these two types of pricing. In my current world, we do a lot of B2B pricing. And depending on the size of the organization you're pricing to, they may have sourcing teams that can go and look up and do costing on what you're doing. So it's really hard to move away from anything other than cost-based pricing when you have someone down the line that's analyzing what you're doing. You end up losing bids or having work walk out the door. However, B2C is really different. In the B2C world, usually customers, there's a search cost, right? And they're generally speaking looking for the best price at the best quality. And sometimes there's other constraints like time. So in the B2C world, when I've done this both in banking and in airlines, it's much more transactional. They see it once and then they're able to kind of go on. I think the really big difference in B2B, you get squeezed a lot more. You have to know your price floor a lot more in B2B because you may be engaged in a longer project, maybe a longer engagement, a longer relationship with someone. And so in that scenario, if you're priced a little bit low, that low pricing you could be in a contract and you could be stuck in that for a long time and you could be losing money for a much longer time. Whereas in the B2C world, there may be some subscription models, but usually there's like an exit point for something, and then you're able to reconfigure your pricing. You move a lot faster in B2C and be a lot more transparent. I think one big thing with this that kind of affects both of these is how opaque your pricing is and how easy it is to search your competitors' pricing costs. In B2C, if you're searching for a flight, you can use an online travel agency and look at, 5 or 6 different airlines at the same time, get pretty comparable prices. Whereas if you're getting your air conditioner changed out in your home, you have to wait for someone to come do a bid. That may take a couple of days. They're going to look at it. So you have a lot more leverage kind of in the air conditioner world where you can be much more kind of opaque. It's harder to find what prices of competitors are. And there may be a sense of urgency. For example, we have like 3 feet of snow coming today. And so if your heater isn't working, you care about having it today. You're caring about who's there first, and you're less concerned with the price in that B2C situation. I think another thing kind of moving on different customer types, as you go into, lower income groups or groups that may not have cash available, you can use financing as a pricing mechanism. Generally, financing, there's a cost on your end to hold the capital to then distribute whatever goods or services you're doing. But as you use financing, you're able to unlock maybe tiers of demand that weren't available before. And so in my career, what I've done for financing is right now, if someone can't afford something, the price is too high, you're able to offer them an option where they may not be paying, $10,000 to $20,000 up front, but a couple $100 a month. And so that unlocks a whole nother realm of pricing. You can price interest rates different. And you have a lot of variability there with that. Really unlocks more levels of demand depending on what kind of financing you're able to offer. So there's a bunch of different ways to kind of look at customers when you're like looking at specific groups. So if you're looking at ABC customer segmentation, you can look at, okay, do we price this customer based on the margin? Like they may be really good margin, or do we price them based on the volume? In my world, a lot of what I do now is I will price based on volume. But I kind of do the opposite of what would be intuitive. I charge more for people that are going to have higher volume because they require higher service levels. It's a greater cost to me. And so I know that price floor. I know what it's going to cost to reach, when they have a last minute call, getting out there to do that. And that's kind of my thoughts on like pricing to a couple different customer demographics there, kind of how we can go about those two kind of bifurcations. Donna and Kim, you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would be happy to add, especially in terms of this bid pricing. So, and generally, we did a lot of that, especially when you supply to governmental organizations or like really large enterprises. It all goes through bid pricing, and the competition is insane. And what competitors are doing, they just try to win this bidding on any price, and everybody knows it's not doable at this price. And what happens then afterwards is generally you go to the customer and renegotiate the package. So if you know that the customer will allow that, then knowing your price floor, you can go deep. Yeah. So, and if you will not renegotiate the contract, then you might end up in loss or you must walk away from this contract. So he had a very, very clear calculation with all unexpected costs that must be on hand on the table before you go on this bidding procedure. And just adding a bit to financing as pricing mechanism as well, especially when it is make to order product, then the suppliers usually expect a prepayment. And if the customer is not willing to put a down payment, but you know the customer and you can talk to them, then you can charge them more in exchange to better payment conditions. And generally, there's a similar research, and it's very popular now. There's a lot of discussion that younger generation lives on credit cards and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of research that says that this easiness of payment when at the checkout you're offered an installment payment or whatever kind of credit product, then people spend money easier and they are less sensitive to price. So that's just a note. And from the profitability point of view, what I would like to mention about ABC customers and customers that take a lot of volume. So we all need it in B2B because we need someone to fill our capacity because we want this negotiating power with suppliers. We want to be sure that we can pay our employees and so on. So we're actually happy when a client takes half of the capacity. But these types of clients, they tend to negotiate heavily. And if you're really going below your price floor, then you must make sure that the rest of the customers, which can be like you have 2 A customers that do half of the turnover or more, and the rest 80 or 200 customers are doing another 50%. So you must make sure that these B and C guys, that they compensate this sacrificed profit that you gave to your A customer. And in general, there are A customers that give you margin and volume, and everybody wants that. And it's very nice to please this group of customers. However, strategically, if you lose this customer, then you are at risk to lose the business. So that was my take on that.
Already, I can just add that it is from my angle. I would say in the hotel industry, there was not that much. Oh, of course, there have always been ABC or different kind of customers, but it's I would say more prior to Corona, it was all hotels tried to have their sweet spot much more important. You try to focus on your those kind of customers that you want to attract with your product. But this has changed a lot, that it's everyone want to attract much more. And that is in itself creates another problem, that a lot of products are overlapping, and these kind of customers actually are paying different kind of prices. And that can be complicated, and you have to, I will come back to that in the slides slightly later on, how you try to keep the different types of customers to the correct pricing. They don't buy from the wrong price that you don't want them to have. And this is, I think this is something we'll come back to, because this is one of the problems when you have different price categories, that you want your customer to be attracted by the right price. I think we can move on. Yeah.
Right.
So,
right, then,
kind of going.
Yeah, go ahead then.
You can go on that one.
On retail.
No, yeah, one
No.
back.
One back, please.
Yep, there.
All right. So in retail, depending on how you package your product, you can create kind of that like opaque, hard to differentiate what is actually in one product versus another. And when I was consulting, I saw one really large example of this, and that's psyllium husk fiber, which probably means nothing to most people, but that is the like key ingredient in Metamucil and digestive like constipation remedies. It's also used as a weight loss remedy because it expands in your stomach and makes you feel full. And so they package this exact same product different ways, and they'll be in the same container just with a different wrap, and sell it at very different price points. And you see that all over in a bunch of different products. Several years ago, Apple announced they were doing this when they came out with the iPhone C. It was like essentially the same iPhone, but it had a different plastic cover. They sold it for way less so they could unlock lower tiers of pricing and capture more of the market. I think another really good example of this you see is the pink tax. So things that are made specifically for women or like branded that way, it may be the exact same product. You can sell soap for a slightly higher margin if someone feels that it's tailored to them. So as pricing can step hand in hand with your marketing and your, I guess, your packaging group, you can really unlock different levels of pricing. You see this a lot in the airlines. I mean, everyone's sitting on the same seat well, not the same seat, but similar seats in an airline, but because maybe you're connecting to a different city some way, or you bought it at a different point in time, it's the same product that's been packaged differently and sold at a different price point. Other ways you see this in retail are customer loyalty programs. So very, very large, something Amazon does, and I worked for Amazon for years, is where you buy a Prime membership so you get that free shipping, which then incentivizes you to spend more. And they actually, if you sign in and out of Amazon, you sign in as someone that didn't have a Prime membership, you'll see the prices change. So that's built into the cost of shipping. You also see other retail discounts. Often there'll be a published price and maybe a coupon price that someone has, or sometimes new customer offers. That's very common in the cell phone market. There's some incentive to switch where there's a much lower price point than there are for existing customers, which probably has mixed results amongst consumer feelings. I think something that was fun, we talked about in the pre-conversation for this is discounts, how you don't necessarily want to call it a discount amongst the industry, but discounts, sometimes you're trying to move inventory off of a shelf and you need to sell it at a lower price point so you can free that shelf space up for other inventory. I have this issue right now in my current business where I have a bunch of old obsolete products that were meant to repair air conditioners that are like 20 years old that don't exist in the market anymore. So I need to do something to free that inventory up so I can get rid of that shelf space and put new products that are like serviceable out there. So sometimes you look at like, okay, what is the discount? What's the like larger picture of this pricing? And then you can also bundle things together. When you sell things together, there's usually a perception that someone's getting a value and you can lower the price point or not, depending on how you bundle it. And then kind of talking to advertising, you always want to step with your most profitable product. That's what you want to sell the highest margin of, or the largest quantity. So for me, I can do service work all day fixing someone's air conditioner. That doesn't make nearly as much money as when I install a new unit. So when I'm installing or I'm advertising, I always advertise the largest margin.
There's a question that someone just posed. When we do pricing of a product, there are a lot of cost components involved in pricing. To be updated with technology, what portion of R&D cost should be part of the pricing component?
I think it's
Good
a question. Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think it's very much about your strategy. And if this R&D is related to this specific project, then of course you can allocate these costs to the project. Or otherwise it sits on your fixed costs, right? And perhaps Rafe is the best person to answer the question. Or?
You know, it's interesting because we have a telecom profitability interest group as well. And a very similar type of question came up because this is like a business sustaining type of cost, right? It's not directly traceable to any specific cost object. So the question is, how do you treat these costs from a pricing perspective, and or even from a costing perspective, right? On which your price is based. And in the telecom industry, at least, they are pricing for regulatory purposes, and so they have to include these costs in their pricing. And we have active discussions about the proper way to do that. Because they have a lot of sustaining investments, a lot of fixed investments, and most of their costs our investments are fixed. So, and I'm sure Doug can opine on this as well. I mean, in some cases, you might say we're not going to trace these costs. This is business sustaining costs to our cost objects, but understand that our pricing has to be such that we are making a profit. Or you could, again, I'm sure there are a couple of schools of thought here. You could allocate your R&D costs based on weak causality, right? Some projection perhaps of the sales of these products.
Yeah, I think it's important too to separate your R&D costs into the sustaining costs versus the growth costs. Because if you're spending R&D to grow your business, that doesn't belong in the costs and costing you use to look at profitability of the business that's going out the door now. But the R&D cost to sustain your business is. It makes a difference. It's hard to distinguish sometimes, but growth is funded by your profits. Sustaining is generated by recapturing your costs. So you want to incorporate some of it, not necessarily all of it, depending on what the nature of that R&D is.
Yeah, and I would say too, I was from the food business. If we were going to kick off an R&D project to create a new candy or something like that, the work needs to be done up front. Is the costs that you're going to incur for the R&D project typically going to be covered if that product is successful and goes to market? So you make that decision kind of up front. Once you've spent the money is gone, and then punishing your product with those costs and giving you difficulty pricing in the market may cause the product itself to fail. You see it also in the medical industry that if they have 2 out of 10 projects that they're doing R&D on that succeed, burdening the ones that succeed with the 8 that fail is going to kill you in the marketplace as well. So I think that's kind of what Doug was talking about.
I think one way
I was just saying, and looking at the adage we try to promote people to follow is that there's different costs for different purposes. Is a launch cost or the R&D cost before you decide to do something, that cost is critical. Once you spend it, it's irrelevant.
Right.
So it's important to keep it, make sure you frame the decision correctly when you're defining what the cost is you're looking at.
I think one thing they did at the airlines, that was an interesting way to do this, is when you work in revenue management, you have no idea what the costs are. And the reason they do that is that you can divorce yourself from the feeling of like what this costs and maximize revenue. So I know, like, when I first heard this, I was like, okay, that's crazy. Why would you, like, you want to know what your cost is, you need to be profitable. But I think it takes people's emotions out of it when they're maximizing, and they don't feel that they're like maybe ripping someone off when the economic value, the demand and the willingness to pay is so much greater than the cost put in. And I think that's really how you get those spikes in revenue, is when you take the costs out and your revenue management centers as a whole. I have this problem in my business now where my guy who does sales knows what the costs are. And so he always has trouble pushing a high margin because he feels like that's like disingenuous to the customer. Whereas if you're truly focused on revenue management, that the costs are arbitrary. You're trying to maximize on that transaction or that relationship.
I think it's a very interesting point that Dan brought in because we just wrapped up a research paper on efficiency, and so we find that firms are on a very high level of efficiency in the path of generating customer satisfaction out of cost. So they're consistently at approximately 80%, so which is very high efficiency score. But on the revenue side, they're consistently on like 45, 46%. And this is what other research is also finding. So generally, it says that there's a lot of potential to maximize revenue. And so the question is, how do I guide this maximization? How do I make these decisions, right? And we would like to talk about that in the end of our slides. No?
Yeah, just to add on what Daniel said, that I think is important is specifically when you talk about airlines, is that yes, it's difficult to see the actual price, and I would say from a revenue management perspective, you don't even look at, because the plane will take off with like 180 seats on it, whether it's empty or full. Anyhow, at 8:00 it will depart. So the important is how much can I fill it. Of course, the number of people on board will slightly affect the fuel consumption, but still the plane is departing. So it's up to me as a revenue manager to try to fill it with as many people as possible. So this is one of the differences between this kind of revenue management and the retail. But still, you can borrow a lot of this thinking still into retail, I think also, but one should keep in one's mind that it's a very different way of pricing a product, because the plane will take off, as I said, even if it's empty or full.
Let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you have to know what your cost structure is. If you have largely fixed costs, hotels, airlines, you're maximizing revenue. Otherwise, perhaps you need to know your costs a little better. Absolutely.
Exactly. You can't really look it from that perspective, because it's so many other factors of airline costs and airport costs and everything that is like you can't really control those. Those are happening, as I said, with empty planes or with full planes. They are basically the same. So it's you must maximize from another perspective, and the same goes for hotel also. Of course, I'll come back to that. The cleaning cost and the worn down of the room, of course, is affected of how many guests you have in there. But still, it's the house of 200 rooms is there each and every night, even if it's empty or full. Yeah, maybe we'll move to next slide. Okay, yeah. So here's a bit where I come in on this. So yes, okay, we have partly already touched this exactly of the airline and the pricing, and so yes, the basic for my part of the industry, it began basically. If you go back, the typical, mentioning hotel where I come from, we had something called the rack rate, the normal rate for the hotel room. Every room had one rate, but this goes back very, very far, and since many years now, and you don't even want to talk about the rack rate. There is not one base price per room, and there's no discounts any longer. Now instead it's like today's pricing already, because we want to avoid to talk about discounts in all. So it's more about what is the price of the room now. As I said, this comes from the airline industry, that of course they found out many years ago that the flight between London and New York at 8:00 Monday morning is more worth per seat than the midday Thursday, when not so many want to travel. And of course, then it's easy to raise the price, have a higher price per seat on that seat. And hotels have typically borrowed a lot of their revenue strategy from the airline industry, because the airlines is even more tight up, as said. They just have those number of seats, and yes, they can just try to maximize that on every single departure. The hotels are slightly more flexible, because they can work with number of nights and try to make that different. And it also affects a bit how the customer is using the hotel. And one night guest is typically just checking in the evening and depart in the morning, and maybe don't use restaurant or bar or anything else. But if you're staying 2 or 3 nights, you are more typical to go down to a restaurant or to the bar and that is added value to you. So that's why you've always, hotels are preferring, of course, the longer stay guests for that reason. Also that you don't have to change linen, etc. These costs are also reduced when you have longer term customers. So hotels are always try to have as many long-term guests, or at least not one night guests. This is something you typically see if you are starting to look for room on your own for yourself or for your family, that if you are booking 2-3 nights and specific nights, prices are reduced compared to single night, or those most looked after or wanted nights like Tuesday night. If it's a business week, for instance, it's typically Tuesday, Wednesday are those nights that have the highest demand, and those prices are often then the highest. There is a discussion. I don't know how it's in US. It will maybe already have it in here in Europe. We have seen more and more of this going out to the restaurant, where you also maybe could look at different prices on when you eat the food, so to say. We have it a lot with special price for lunch. The same dish could be much less costly for lunch, but now we also have a discussion of maybe if you're coming Friday night, that entrecote is more costly than you eat it on a Tuesday night. It's the same dish, it's the same room, it's the same waiter, but there's a lot more demand on Friday night than Tuesday night. So maybe it should be slightly more costly. Not saying that it's more expensive, but you can have it. If you can do that dinner on a Tuesday night when it's less demand, you can have the same nice dinner for lesser price instead. But this is a bit controversial. I don't, as I see it from my perspective, my part of the world, the discussion is here, but there's a lot of objections. They know you can't do like that. But it was the same in the hotel industry when we started to differentiate prices. Oh, it should be, you should know that a single room costs this and a double room costs this. So I think this is always a period of transition when you have to bring it to the market. I said you can also borrow this slightly over to retail on short-term promotion pricing. We already have it, of course, a lot with Black Friday prices, etc. This is basically reduction, but you create here an urgency of these kind of prices is just happening. You have to do it within this time frame of booking it now or buying it now. But it's much more difficult to do it on the retail side, since Tuesday night is only Tuesday night. You can only sell it for that one, but the TV or something is the same one wherever you sell it. So you can't really adopt the same thinking over here. Daniel, you want to add something here, or Ganna?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, like, don't you think that for the restaurants, it's there for a long time? It's just we don't call it, I don't know, capacity maximization or so, because when you think of a happy hour is something what is here for ages, right? And this is nothing else but to fill up your capacity during the low demand hours, and perhaps generate some extra revenue. And I don't know if you followed this discussion on Bendy's dynamic pricing, how much, like, went wrong just with the publicity, that it's nothing like your meal gross in price and follows like minute wise. It's just about I think it's very important in restaurants that you try to make your demand more predictable. I don't know. And I wanted to ask you a question, like when you talked about hotels and average length of stay, from your experience, I mean, you are the one who should have the insight. How much the customer information is used in the hotel analytics, and how much the managers, the hotel property managers, how much do they use this number? How many customers? How many unique customers? How many people per room? Length of stay, because when you go data like from STR, which is really information provider, leading information provider, you will never find a number of unique customers. And even if you read research, then it is supposed that this information is there, but managers are using that not so often. Like everybody goes in RevPAR, and so more abstract numbers that are ratios and so on. So how much of customer information is there and how much is in use?
As much as possible, of course, and you're absolutely right. Every single revenue manager and hotel manager is trying to deep down into this subject as much as they can. Problem is, there are a couple of problems, and one of the problems are the OTAs and the website like Booking.com, etc., because they are not sharing more than they are forced to. So and this is both on the technical side and also on the commercial side. That let's take Booking.com for instance, they don't share more than they absolutely have to create a reservation. That, for instance, they are not sharing the unique email address that the reservation is done from, because if the hotel have the email address directly, then they can match it with the maybe already existing customer card in the hotel. But Booking.com don't want to do that, because they want to own the customer. So, and this is one of the difficult things that we are trying to help hotels with, how to match and to make us an accurate statistic and prognosis based on what kind of customers is actually arriving. Because you don't know on Booking.com, you don't know if this is a businessman or if this is leisure travel or whatever it is, because you just have reservation. Hotels try to, what I said earlier, are trying to create different pricing for different kinds of customers. But when you're at the OTAs or the websites, it's the same price you throw out there, and you don't really see who your buyer is until too late, so to say. So we are trying to help the hotels with matching the arriving reservations with existing customer cards to create an as accurate statistics and prognosis based on that as possible. But this is a trick part. This is absolutely the trickiest one, because this is so much. Booking.com, to take an example, they want to keep this as their commercial value. They want to keep as much of the customer information as possible away from the hotel, to be absolute, because they want the customer to book the same way next time also. They don't want the customer to book directly with the hotel. That the hotel, on the other hand, want them to do, because then they can earn some 17% of the value that would go to Booking.com if you book that way.
But do hotel managers actually work with such number as let's say gross profit per customer, per unique customer? So do they?
Oh yes, we must. It's everyone is moving or trying to move away from, you mentioned like RevPAR, revenue per available room, to TrevPAR, total revenue per available room, where you should take in all costs, staff costs, rent costs, cleaning, linen, etc., etc. This makes it of course much more difficult to have the exact. But if you are doing this nicely, you have a much more accurate net value of each and every guest. Yes, and this has been discussion point for 10 years at least in hotel industry. But I would say there are still, unfortunately, very few hotels who have a reliable TrevPAR value, I would say.
Well, and you mentioned restaurants in the US, a lot of times to fill the seats during the week, they'll present loss leaders. They won't discount their menu, but they'll put loss leaders out there like Tuesday night, kids eat free, or Wednesday night, half bottle of wine. There's a place that my wife and I go to that they offer a really cheap steak special on Monday night. It's the busiest restaurant in town on Mondays. Last time we were there, I think we were the only ones who actually ordered the steak. So it got people in the door to look at the menu, and they spent regular money. So, I think that's the way restaurants really get their Monday through Thursday crowd.
I think you're right. And this is also why it's sensitive, because you don't want to move them away from that Friday too much, but you still got that where your best money is. Right. This is why, yes, you can do it in different ways to attract them to other nights, but you don't want to be too successful with it, because then you're moving your income to the wrong price, so to say.
Well, I think you do, because if you are more or less price sensitive, then you would rather go to the restaurant on Tuesday, and because there's low probability you will do Tuesday and Friday. And what happens is that on Friday you have less crowd and shorter queue. and less waiting times, which is actually nicer for a customer that comes on Friday. It's also nicer for your staff that is not overloaded, doesn't get under pressure. And I mean, I had an ice cream shop, okay? So you can't imagine what is when there's a special event, good weather, and high eating times, how a queue to an ice cream parlor looks like, right? So it's you need like a fan glass. I don't know what is that. It's and it can get stressful. I mean, if you're experienced hotelier or experienced restaurateur, you can you learn how to manage that. But still, you get under stress, and there are also moments when, for example, you know exactly three people will do it relaxed, professionally, it will be all fine. But then comes the moment when three people is not enough. But if you put there a fourth one, then it's not that profitable anymore. And you need to give this fourth person the hours, yeah? And so taking the demand a bit off, it never hurts. It's a very good
I
example.
fully agree, and I think this is clearly correct way of looking at it. But you have that other argument is often there that, oh, we are moving the customer to the wrong day, to the wrong price, and it's I agree, and I don't think there are these are different kind of the more price sensitive customers will hopefully be more attracted by the Tuesday in that case than the Friday. But this is one of the ever returning discussions we have as soon as you are starting to look at differentiated pricing on different days.
Okay, let's
I
move
think the
on. I
way.
think. Oh, go ahead.
Do we have a question or something?
So one thing that you also see like in U.S. culture on like time of like I guess we said time of day, but it could also be seasonal. Like
Absolutely.
I think it was 7 or 8 years ago in the U.S. Retailers created a new holiday in the middle of summer when their demand is lower, and part of the reason you do that from an operational perspective is also so you can plan and be ready for those peak days. You have employees that you have to pay to be in the shops at those time anyway. So when Prime Day first came out in the U.S., it was a great opportunity to experiment and get ready for Black Friday. You stimulated a lot of growth, and it became like industry wide. Even like Target and Walmart that before they started doing their own deals saw growth as well. And so sometimes creating those discount prices can create excitement and then spur a little bit more activity in those time periods.
And just you need to know your margins. You need to be very clear with your numbers, and then you can play.
I just want to tell the panelists we have about 15 minutes left, and I'd like to have 5 minutes at the end for Q&A.
We probably have to move on. Yes.
So I love this discussion. I want to participate too, but I think I'll hold my comments and move on to the next slide.
So level of urgency, I guess, is really applicable in airlines and hotels. If someone needs to stay that night, you charge more for close-in bookings than you do further out. There's also special event pricing. A great example is in a week here, the U.S. will start a large college basketball tournament, and you don't know if your team's playing in the final until shortly before. And if you want to buy that ticket, you buy it last minute. So often when I worked in this department, what we did is we looked at all the teams, and as they were progressing, blocked off seats on those flights so we would have availability later on. And when we say we block them off, we just, okay, highest price point we have available, that's what we'll sell it for until it comes down lower and we can lower the prices when teams get eliminated. So urgency can drive a lot of pricing. You also think about when you go to like a movie theater or sports event, you may be hungry there and you're going to pay more for your food there than you would if you were out on the street. I think we have the flexible delivery to fill idle capacity. That's kind of like the last minute travel deals and discounts. But I'm trying to move quickly in the interest of time. Kim and Ghana, do you have other things to say on that?
No, I think no, let's move on. I think that would cover it. Yeah.
I think just to wrap up that in make to order industries, it's always a question how urgent you need it, also for contractors and so. And if you have an urgent order, and then you might shift your other customers, keeping them unhappy, but you really charge the premium price. And if it's an urgent order, you need to spend more resources on that. Yeah, when you have the time flexibility, then you actually can give a nice price to a customer and fill in your capacity when you're idle. Okay? On my side.
Great. Yeah.
So here this slide was born out of the discussion when Kim mentioned that there's a difference between a short-term and long-term business strategy.
Yeah, exactly. I had one example of when you look at the pricing of a hotel. I had a discussion with, there are many so-called revenue management software products on the market, and I had a discussion with one of the vendors here that they said that they could fill every single night for the best possible price. If you gave them full flexibility of no top price or no lowest price, they would each and every night make sure that you had the optimal price at every single time if you want to fill your hotel. And discussion I had with them was that, yes, I can agree on this, and this probably actually works if you are what I would call an airport hotel. What I mean with airport hotel, this is a kind of hotel that basically have customers coming and going all the time without, you don't look that much for returning guests that want to come there for the reason of the location of the hotel or something else. You fill the hotel just by demand of departures and arrivals at the airport. If you compare that to what I would call, for instance, a business hotel or something, or leisure hotel, where you want to have returning guests and guests that are loyal. And what I see as a problem here, that if your prices are done in a revenue management way like this, so it's absolutely, price can differentiate double price, even triple price from one week to another. It's very hard to create that feeling of that the customer could be loyal, because the pricing is not loyal to you. If you don't know what the price is, a lot of traveling businessmen have a maximum amount. When I'm out traveling, I have the exact amount how much I'm allowed to spend. If I have a hotel that 50% of the time is over that limit, how can I be loyal with that hotel if it's not in my price limit? So it's contradicting here that you have, yes, on one level you are maximizing with the prices, but you're working against the interest of your guest and how you create loyalty. And this is one of the main things hotels are trying to work with, is loyalty. Well, that is
like really
in a way more
long-term.
worth than maximizing every single night. But these two are both important, and they don't really go hand in hand, unfortunately.
Correct. And when we think about food service, it's exactly the same. When you have a high frequented tourist attraction and you're selling hot dogs, you can charge whatever you want, and there's not much care how good the hot dogs are. However, when you run a local restaurant where local people are coming and returning customers, then this is exactly the situation where one must be clear about that. In such a one-time business, you have a high cost situation, high rent. There's not much service expected. You can do with low service level, and you can maximize the price. While on the long-term perspective, you have more predictable, more stable cost, more bearable cost, and you've got to provide higher level of service, and you cannot be too bold with your prices. So it's again profitability aspects.
It is a gamble, and exactly, and I think it should be taken into very deep consideration. Exactly, it's the same as you say. If you sell hot dogs outside the stadium, yeah, the demand is there, and you can basically, you don't have to think about the returning customer there either. It try to sell for the best price you can have there and then. It's exactly the same. A very good example.
We have a question, but before I say what it is, I did put some questions in the chat feature here. And if before everyone leaves, please just give us your feedback. But the question is, while doing risk assessment for a customer, which P&L category is best approach to calculating risk? Is it gross margin, considering standard cost, or NIAT? Probably net income after tax, I'm guessing.
Well, I'm not guessing. From my own experience, I can say that GP is a very good number, and the sustainability of gross profit, and also seeing that the P&L owner understands what is the contributing activity and can explain you, and you can also understand and assess it. Yeah. And so it must be clear that the gross profit covers your fixed costs and leaves something in the end of the period for the owner. And I think it's a quickest and cleanest number to assess the risk, as to me. If I would be in a tax authorities, this is the number I would look at always.
Can we move on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So it's actually our last type of different pricing, and this is pricing to different generations. So as Dan mentioned, the insurance pricing based on age. When I turned 50, I started getting advertisement that I shall buy myself an insurance for funeral cost. that's,
Oh dear.
that's like from all companies in one day. So, and this is so-called experience-based revenue management. And an example is like, if you want a cup of tea, you can get a cup of tea on the tank station, yeah, and just some water in the tea bag, or you can go to the tea house and have a tea experience, right? And you pay for it to experience that. And same as with coffee or food, you can have pizza in the box, or you can go to a fancy restaurant and enjoy your pizza there. And of course, based on the values that different generations have, they do accept your pricing strategies around that. I think someone must mute. It would be nice if the participants would mute themselves. Right. And I think the most manifesting example is places like Starbucks that is still just selling coffee, which is just coffee and water. But like the younger people, they fancy that place. And I mean, we often pay for a cup of coffee in the airport, $8 or $9.
Please mute yourself if you're not speaking.
And one of the examples is the Chipotle that I would like to talk separately. Dan, would you like to talk about these different sellers and platforms, just to mention?
I just added that as it's another way of course, you can, exactly as you said, Ghana, yes, in a tea room, that is maybe attracting the slightly elderly, and Starbucks is attracting the younger. My daughters love Starbucks. I don't really care for them, but this is one typical example of how different brands can attract. And I think the same goes also for seller platforms, etc., that depending on where you find the product and where it's sold, it's attracting different kind of buyers. So it's you can actually, I think, sell the same TV at slightly different prices depending on where it's seen. And Google is really, as we all know, really good at seeing who you are and pushing ads for those kind of different platforms depending on your pattern on the internet. So I have seen several times that I, of course, see totally different ads compared to my daughters, for instance, and that leads us to different platforms for purchase. And then sometimes it's the same thing. And then on TikTok, I know they see ads there that I would never ever see because I'm not on TikTok. So those are clearly, if you are adding there, yes, you are heading for the younger public, and you can have a different pricing on the same product that I would not be ready to pay for that product. But for them, yeah, maybe they could. Just an example.
And so if we move to the
Take
next
the
slide,
Chipotle
perhaps.
example here,
Yeah.
Ghana.
can you move to the next slide, please? Right. And so when we look at the Chipotle phenomena, yeah, this is just the burrito, and the average price, average burrito price, not an average check, an average burrito price at Chipotle is like $7 to $10, while their main competitor and the oldest competitor, Taco Bell, is selling burrito priced at average $3. And so in general, when you look at the stock price of Chipotle, it's I'm following this company since, I don't know, 2010 or so, and ever since I read when the stock analysts are writing that Chipotle price is stock is overpriced and it will drop, and instead of dropping, it hit the $2,000 mark in 2023, and I mean, of course, it fluctuates. It's a stock performance, but you see a consistent growth. And when you do a revenue analysis, if you do like a growth forecast, if you do like standard earnings analysis, nothing can explain this exceptional performance. And this is exactly a great example when the strategy was focused, like marketing strategy was, and executional strategy was focused on specific generation. They hit their values, and based on that, they built up incredibly loyal customer base. And why it is exceptional? Because in fast food, price drives the traffic, and for fast food, a low price is critical for a fast food restaurant to survive. Actually, as soon as you go above the price point, I mean, I can talk about that for an hour, but we don't have this hour. And here, these guys, they manage to adjust their prices according to increase in average wage, according to increase in food, and still it doesn't hurt the same store traffic. And even if it does, it still doesn't hurt their performance. Yeah, to wrap up, so we talked about different pricing strategies that could be formulated as discounts or price maximization. And when we want to fill the capacity and stimulate customer traffic, then we try to reduce the price. And when we maximize price, then traffic slows down. And so important is not to find yourself in the situation when your traffic is slow or not on the level you need, and you start discounting to stimulate traffic, but that doesn't happen. And then you end up in the situation with low traffic and low price. And for that, of course, knowing your numbers is the key. Shall we move on to the next slide? And just to formulate like important takeaways from all this pricing and profitability analytics exercise. So the value-informed pricing is when you exactly know what your product is worth to the customer, and what it is, what makes you unique, why customer patronize you, and what do they pay for. So this is the way to increase prices and sustain them and still keeping customers happy. And then if you want to play with all that, then you must make sure that you know customer profitability, and that automatically includes product profitability. So the costing must be as detailed as you can actually access any combination of products and customers and transactions to make the decision. And that works very well when your sales and marketing staff knows about, yeah, when they're conscious, because often they are rewarded and they're targeted on sales level. However, we talked a lot about discounts. When your gross profit is at 20% and you make 15% discount because you think, you don't know, you just think that I still make like 5, you already run in loss, right? Because it's a different calculation. And so when your sales staff knows about, when they know how much the profit is, then it doesn't work always, but in certain industries, it could be very helpful. And then based on that, this is how you evaluate your sales and marketing staff, right? Because if they are rewarded based on revenue they hit, then they tend to give discounts to make more, to generate more volume. And right, so if they don't know if they're making money or if they're making loss, then they cannot create value for the company.
Okay, I think we need to wrap it up here. This has been an amazing discussion. So interesting. We've gotten such feedback, similar feedback from many others on this call. We did have a little brief pre-session meeting where we did talk about scheduling the frequency of the future meetings, and monthly seemed to be the way to go, and that seems to be the general consensus. So we will plan on meeting approximately monthly, and I have to sync up with the panel here and see what works on their schedule, and just keep checking out the PACE website for our future dates. There's so much more we can talk about, and hope to see everybody there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
everyone, for
everyone.
having us.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.